The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another rut in the dusty Wyoming trail, throwing Clara Whitmore against the worn leather seat. She clutched her carpetbag tighter, the last remnant of her Boston life, and stared out at the endless expanse of sagebrush and red rock that stretched toward the horizon. 3 weeks of travel had brought her here, to this desolate territory where her future husband awaited, Samuel DeWitt. She'd seen his photograph once, a stern-faced man with cold eyes and a mustache waxed to sharp points. Her father had assured her that Mr. DeWitt was a prosperous cattle baron, a man of substance who would provide well for her. The arrangement had been swift, conducted through letters and intermediaries. At 23, Clara was considered nearly past marriageable age in Boston society, especially after... She pushed the memory away. The driver's shout announced their arrival in Cheyenne. Clara smoothed her travel-worn dress, a deep blue wool that had seemed so fine in Boston but now appeared desperately out of place among the rough wooden buildings and muddy streets. The September sun beat down mercilessly, nothing like the gentle autumn light she'd known back east. Samuel DeWitt stood waiting at the stage depot, flanked by 2 ranch hands. He was shorter than she'd imagined, with a paunch that strained against his brocade vest. His eyes swept over her with the calculating gaze of a man appraising livestock. "Miss Whitmore," he said, tipping his hat perfunctorily, "I trust your journey was not too taxing." "Mr. DeWitt." Clara managed a curtsy despite her trembling knees. "I am grateful to have arrived safely." He gestured to one of his men to take her bags. "We'll proceed directly to Judge Morrison's office. I've arranged for the ceremony to take place this afternoon." Clara's heart sank. She had hoped for at least a day to recover from her journey, to prepare herself mentally for this new life, but she merely nodded, following him down the wooden sidewalk past saloons and mercantile stores, aware of the curious stares from townspeople. Judge Morrison's office occupied the 2nd floor of a brick building that housed the territorial courthouse. The judge, a thin man with yellowed teeth, greeted them with obvious deference to DeWitt. "Everything is in order, Samuel," he said, producing a marriage certificate. "Just need the lady's signature here." Clara reached for the pen, her hand hesitating above the paper. This was the moment that would seal her fate, transform her from Clara Whitmore of Boston into Mrs. Samuel DeWitt of Wyoming Territory. "One moment," DeWitt said sharply. He turned to Clara, his eyes narrowing. "There is one matter we must discuss privately. Judge, if you would excuse us." The judge nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. DeWitt circled Clara slowly, like a wolf sizing up prey. "I am a thorough man, Miss Whitmore," he began. "I make no investments without proper investigation. After our engagement was settled, I had my attorney in Boston make certain inquiries." Clara's blood chilled. "Inquiries? About your medical history?" His voice grew hard. "Imagine my surprise when I learned of your unfortunate incident 2 years ago. The pregnancy, the miscarriage." The room spun. Clara gripped the back of a chair for support. "I was engaged then? It was not improper." "The propriety is not my concern." DeWitt cut her off. "What concerns me is that the physician who attended you expressed doubts about your ability to bear children in the future. Scarring," he said, "damage to your womb." Tears stung Clara's eyes. "Doctors can be wrong. Many women who've suffered as I have go on to have children. Perhaps, but I am not a gambling man." DeWitt's lip curled in disgust. "I need sons to inherit my empire, strong sons to carry on the DeWitt name. What use is a wife who cannot provide them? You are damaged goods, Miss Whitmore, worthless to me." The words struck Clara like physical blows. She swayed on her feet, shame and humiliation washing over her in waves. DeWitt strode to the door and yanked it open. "Judge Morrison, we will not be needing your services after all. This woman has perpetrated a fraud." Within minutes, word had spread through the courthouse, then into the street. Clara found herself standing on the sidewalk, her bags dumped unceremoniously at her feet. as curious townspeople gathered to witness her disgrace. DeWitt's voice carried clearly as he explained to anyone who would listen how he had been nearly swindled into marriage with a barren woman who had concealed her defects. "Let this be a lesson," he declared, mounting his horse. "I'll not be taken for a fool by some desperate Eastern spinster." He rode off with his men, leaving Clara alone in the gathering crowd. The whispers grew louder, more cruel. "Damaged goods," someone repeated, "trying to trick an honest man. No wonder she's not married at her age." Clara tried to lift her bags, but her hands shook too violently. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she had nowhere to go. The stage wouldn't return east for another week, and she had spent nearly all her money on the journey here. "Ma'am?" A young woman in a faded calico dress approached hesitantly. "The Frontier Hotel might have a room. For the likes of her?" A rough-looking man in dusty chaps spat tobacco juice near Clara's skirts. "Doubt misses. Patterson wants that kind in her establishment." As evening fell, Clara had been turned away from 2 hotels and a boarding house. Her fine Boston clothes marked her as an outsider, and DeWitt's public denunciation had marked her as something worse. She finally found herself in the poorest section of town, where a slovenly woman agreed to rent her a room above a saloon for an exorbitant price. The room was barely larger than a closet, with a narrow cot and a wash basin. Through the thin floorboards, Clara could hear the raucous laughter and piano music from below. She sat on the cot, still in her traveling dress, and finally allowed herself to weep. How had it come to this? 6 months ago, she had been attending concerts and literary societies in Boston. Now she was alone in a frontier town, publicly humiliated, with barely enough money to last a week. The irony was bitter. She had accepted DeWitt's proposal partly to escape the whispered gossip about her broken engagement and lost pregnancy. Instead, she had found herself exposed to far worse. As night deepened, the saloon below grew rowdier. Clara heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, drunken voices in the hallway. Her door had no lock. She pushed the washstand against it and sat back on the cot, clutching her carpet bag. Near midnight, someone pounded on her door. "Open up, Eastern lady. Heard you're looking for a husband." More laughter, more pounding. Clara pressed herself against the wall, praying they would leave. Eventually, the footsteps stumbled away. Dawn came slowly, painting the dingy room in pale light. Clara had not slept. Her money would last perhaps 5 more nights in this place. Less if she ate. The return stage fare would take everything she had, and what would she return to? Her father had made it clear that this marriage was her last chance at respectability. She ventured out to find food, keeping her head down. But the damage was done. Shop owners looked at her with contempt or speculation. At the general store, the proprietor charged her double for a loaf of bread and some cheese. Special price for special ladies. He leered. By the 3rd day, Clara's money was nearly gone. Desperate, she tried to find work, as a seamstress, a shop girl, even a laundress. But DeWitt's influence was long, and no respectable establishment would hire her. That evening, as she counted her remaining coins, the saloon owner's wife knocked on her door. "Rent's due tomorrow," the woman announced. "Though there might be other ways a pretty thing like you could pay." Her meaning was unmistakable. Clara recoiled. "I'll have your money." "Sure you will." The woman laughed harshly. "They all say that at first." That night, the harassment grew worse. Multiple men tried her door, calling out crude propositions. Clara hadn't eaten in 2 days, and weakness made her dizzy. She knew that tomorrow, when she couldn't pay the rent, she would be on the street. And then, the sound of breaking glass from the saloon below made her jump. Angry voices rose. Then the sharp crack of gunfire. Screams. More shots. Heavy boots thundered up the stairs. Clara pressed against the wall, trembling. This was how it would end. Then, in violence and degradation, far from home. Her door burst open, the flimsy washstand flying aside. 3 men crowded in, reeking of whiskey. Clara recognized one. He had propositioned her that morning on the street. Well, Well, he slurred. Eastern ladies all alone. Time you learned how things work out here. Clara tried to run, but they blocked her path. Rough hands grabbed her arms. She screamed, but the sound was lost in the chaos below. This was it, the final degradation, the last step in her fall from grace. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. A figure in a long duster coat swung through, moving with lethal grace. Clara glimpsed a weathered face, dark eyes cold as winter stone. Before the intruder's fist connected with the nearest man's jaw, the fight was brief and brutal. The stranger moved with economical precision, every blow calculated. Within moments, all three men were on the floor, groaning or unconscious. The stranger turned to Clara, and she saw his face clearly for the first time in the lamplight. He was perhaps 35, with sun-darkened skin and black hair that needed cutting. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw. His clothes were trail-worn but well-maintained, and the colt at his hip looked like an extension of his body. But it was his eyes that held her, dark, haunted, yet strangely gentle as they assessed her for injury. "You hurt?" His voice was low, gravelly from disuse. Clara shook her head, unable to speak. The stranger nodded once, then moved to gather her few possessions, stuffing them efficiently into her carpet bag. "Come on," he said. "This place is about to get a lot worse." As if to emphasize his words, smoke began seeping through the floorboards. The saloon was on fire. Clara didn't hesitate. She took the hand he offered, rough with calluses but surprisingly gentle, and followed him to the window. "Ever ride a horse?" he asked. "Yes, but—" He was already lifting her through the window onto the slanted roof outside. A rope hung there, and below, 2 horses waited in the alley. With practiced ease, he helped her descend, then followed swiftly. "Up!" he commanded, boosting her onto a bay mare. He swung onto a black stallion and grabbed her horse's reins. "Hold tight." They rode hard through the night-darkened streets as flames began licking from the saloon windows behind them. Clara caught a glimpse of people forming bucket brigades, heard shouts about the fire spreading. Then they were past the last buildings, plunging into the vast darkness of the open prairie. Only when the lights of Cheyenne had faded to distant specks did the strangers slow their pace. Clara finally found her voice. "Who are you? Why did you—" "Name's Jonas Creed," he said without looking at her. "As for why," he shrugged. "Couldn't abide what was happening. No woman deserves that, no matter what the town says about her." Clara's cheeks burned. "You heard about—" "Hard not to. DeWitt made sure everyone knew." His voice held contempt, but not for her. "Samuel DeWitt is a bastard who measures everything by its use to him. His loss." They rode in silence after that, the stars wheeling overhead in a vast canvas Clara had never imagined in Boston. Despite everything, the terror, the humiliation, the uncertain future, she felt strangely safe beside this dangerous stranger who had appeared like some avenging angel from a dime novel. As dawn approached, Jonas led them into a canyon where cottonwoods grew beside a small stream. He dismounted and helped her down, his hands impersonal but careful. "We'll rest here," he said, already unsaddling the horses. "You need food and sleep." "I don't have any money to pay you." "Didn't ask for any." He pulled supplies from his saddlebags. "Coffee?" As he built a small fire and set water to boil. Clara studied him. Everything about Jonas Creed spoke of a man who lived outside civilization's boundaries. Yet he had risked himself to save her. A stranger. A woman the town had already condemned. "Mr. Creed," she began. "I should know. Are you— that is, what do you do?" He looked up from the fire, a slight smile playing at his scarred mouth. "Wondering if you've traded one danger for another." Yes. Smart woman." He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "I'm wanted by the law. Miss Whitmore. Train robbery, they say, though the truth's more complicated. So yes, you're keeping company with an outlaw. But I give you my word. I mean you no harm. Soon as you figure out where you want to go, I'll see you there safe." Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup, inhaling the bitter aroma. Where did she want to go? Back to Boston, to face her father's disappointment and society's gossip. To another town, to try again with nothing to her name. What if, she said slowly, I don't have anywhere to go? Jonas studied her for a long moment, those dark eyes seeing perhaps more than she intended to show. Then I reckon, he said finally, you'll stay with me until you do. Clara awakened to the sound of wind singing through canyon walls. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous days crashed over her like a cold wave. She sat up on the bedroll Jonas had laid out for her, finding herself alone beside the remains of last night's fire. Panic seized her. Had he abandoned her here? Then she heard the soft nickering of horses and saw him downstream, filling canteens. The morning sun caught the silver in his black hair, highlighted the weathered lines of his face. He moved with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to solitude. There's a creek for washing, he said without turning, somehow aware she was awake. I'll be up at the horses. Clara found the creek sheltered by willow branches. The water was icy, shocking her fully awake as she splashed her face and hands. Her fine Boston dress was ruined, torn, stained with smoke and trail dust. She looked like what she was, a refugee, a woman with no place in the world. When she returned to camp, Jonas had laid out simple breakfast: hardtack, dried beef, more coffee. He ate mechanically, his eyes constantly scanning the canyon rim. Are we being followed? Clara asked. Not yet, but men like me learn to watch. He glanced at her dress. That won't last out here. There's a trading post 2 days north. We'll get you proper clothes. I told you, I have no money. I have enough. His tone brooked no argument. They rode through landscapes that seemed torn from another world. Red rock spires rose like ancient sentinels. Sagebrush stretched endlessly, broken by sudden gorges that plunged to hidden streams. Jonas led them along trails Clara could barely see, through passages that seemed impossible until they opened into hidden valleys. He spoke little, but Clara learned to read his silences, the slight tension in his shoulders when they crossed open ground, the way his hand drifted to his gun when birds fell quiet. He was teaching her without words, how to move through this harsh country, how to become part of it rather than fight it. On the second night, camped beneath a massive overhang of stone, the wind turned bitter. Clara huddled near the fire, but cold seeped through her thin dress. Without comment, Jonas draped his coat around her shoulders. It smelled of leather and gunpowder and something uniquely him. Tell me about the train, Clara said suddenly. Jonas looked up from cleaning his rifle. Why? You saved my life. I should know who I'm traveling with. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my brother Tom was 19. Good kid. Worked at the bank in Laramie. Someone robbed it, killed a guard. The sheriff needed someone to blame quick. And Tom was convenient. Wrong place, wrong time. No rich family to protect him. His hands continued their practiced motions with the rifle, but his voice grew rough. I was scouting for the army. Gone 2 months. Got back to find they'd already hanged him. The real robbers spent their take in the saloons while my brother swung. Clara's throat tightened. I'm sorry. I went a little crazy. Found evidence the sheriff had been paid to look the other way. That the judge knew Tom was innocent. When the law wouldn't listen, I decided to take what they valued most. Money. Hit a train carrying mine payroll. Meant to use it to hire lawyers, investigators, prove what really happened. But they caught you? No. A bitter smile. They caught my partner. He gave them my name to save his own neck. Been running since. The fire crackled between them. Clara pulled his coat tighter, understanding now the weight he carried, the ghosts that haunted those dark eyes. Do you regret it? Regret trying to clear Tom's name? No. Regret the running, the killing when cornered, every day. He looked at her directly. Still want to ride with an outlaw? You're not what they say you are. Clara said softly. You're a man who loved his brother. Something shifted in Jonas's expression, a crack in the armor he wore. He turned back to his rifle, but she caught the slight tremor in his hands. The trading post squatted like a toad beside a muddy river. rough-hewn logs and tar paper surrounded by tippies and wagons. Jonas negotiated with the trader, a grizzled Frenchman who asked no questions about the woman in the ruined dress or the well-armed man buying her supplies. Clara emerged from the back room, transformed. Gone was the Boston lady. In her place stood a frontier woman in sturdy boots, divided skirt, and a man's shirt that actually fit. Jonas had even thought to buy her a proper hat. Better, he said. The closest to approval she'd heard. They resupplied and pushed deeper into the wilderness. Jonas led them into a maze of canyons that grew narrower and more twisted with each mile. Finally, as sunset painted the rocks blood red, they emerged into a hidden valley, a small cabin nestled against the far cliff, with a corral and lean-to stable. "Home," Jonas said, "such as it is." The cabin was sparse but clean. One room with a fireplace, a rough table, 2 chairs. A ladder led to a loft. Jonas had built it well, tight against wind, with clean water from a spring. "You'll take the loft," he said. "I'll bed down here. This is your home. I couldn't—" "You will." Again, that tone that accepted no argument. Clara climbed to the loft, finding a straw mattress and wool blankets. Through cracks in the boards, she watched Jonas moving about below, preparing a simple meal. The domesticity of it struck her, this dangerous man cooking dinner in his hidden sanctuary. Days fell into a rhythm. Jonas taught her survival, how to build a fire in wind, find water in dry country, read weather in cloud formations. Clara proved a quick student, her Boston Polish giving way to practical competence. She learned to shoot his spare revolver, her groupings tight enough to earn one of his rare smiles. But it was the evenings that carved themselves into her heart. They would sit by the fire, Jonas working leather or maintaining weapons, while Clara mended clothes or read from his small collection of books. Sometimes he would tell her about his years as an army scout, the things he'd seen in untouched country. Sometimes she would share memories of Boston, of concerts and gardens and snow-quiet streets. One night, tending a knife cut on his hand, Jonas flinched as Clara cleaned it. She'd insisted on helping despite his protests. "Hold still," she murmured, wrapping the bandage carefully. "Not used to gentle touches," he said, then seemed to realize what he'd revealed. Their eyes met and held. Clara's fingers stilled on his hand. The fire crackled, the only sound in the vast silence surrounding them. Slowly, Jonas lifted his uninjured hand to her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with impossible tenderness. "Clara," he whispered, her name a prayer or a curse. She leaned into his touch, heart hammering, but he pulled away, standing abruptly. "I'll check the horses," he said, and was gone. Clara sat alone, skin still burning where he'd touched her. She understood. He was protecting her, from him, from the life he led, from wants that could only end badly. But understanding didn't ease the ache. October arrived with shocking cold. Jonas's old shoulder wound, taken in some long-ago gunfight, stiffened and pained him. He tried to hide it, but Clara noticed him favoring it, saw the white lines around his mouth. One brutal night, with snow driving sideways and wind screaming through the canyon. Jonas's fever spiked. Clara found him delirious by the dying fire, mumbling about Tom, about trains, about guilt that ate at him. She dragged him to his bedroll, piled on blankets, stoked the fire high. Through the night she bathed his burning skin, forced water between his lips. He thrashed and called out, lost in nightmares. "Tom, I'm sorry. Should have been there. My fault." "Shh," Clara soothed. "It wasn't your fault." His eyes opened, glassy with fever, but seeing her. "Clara, you're still here. Where else would I be?" A broken laugh. "Anywhere but with a worthless outlaw." "You're not worthless." She gripped his hand fiercely. "You saved me. You gave me shelter when the whole world turned away. You're the most worthy man I've known." He studied her face as if memorizing it. "Sometimes I forget I'm damned when you look at me like that." The fever broke near dawn. Jonas slept deeply, his hand still clasped in hers. Clara dozed fitfully in the chair beside him, waking whenever he stirred. When he finally woke, clear-eyed, embarrassment colored his features. "I say anything foolish?" "Nothing I didn't already know," Clara said softly. After that night, something shifted between them. The careful distance Jonas maintained grew harder to hold. Clara would catch him watching her with naked longing before he shuddered his expression. She found excuses to touch him, adjusting his collar, brushing past in the small cabin, and felt him tremble. The tension built like storm clouds. Jonas grew more taciturn, going on long rides alone. Clara threw herself into improving the cabin, anything to avoid dwelling on the heat that pooled in her belly when he looked at her. Then came the night Jonas returned from hunting to find Clara had rearranged the main room, creating more space, adding small touches that made it feel like a home. She'd made rabbit stew from his catch, and the smell filled the cabin. "You didn't have to do this," he said roughly. "I wanted to. This is—" She paused, then forged ahead. "This is home now. For however long you'll let me stay." Jonas crossed to her in 2 strides. "Don't you understand? Every day you're here puts you in danger. When they find me, and they will, you'll hang for harboring a fugitive." "Then I'll hang." Clara lifted her chin defiantly. "At least I'll have lived first, really lived, not just existed as someone's property or disappointment." "Clara." Her name broke from him like a dam bursting. "I can't. If I touch you now, I won't stop. And you deserve better than—" She silenced him with her fingers on his lips. "I deserve to choose. For once in my life. Jonas, let me choose." His control shattered. He pulled her against him, his kiss fierce with months of denial. Clara melted into him, hands fisting in his shirt. He tasted of wind and wildness, of danger and safety impossibly combined. But even as she arched into him, Jonas gentled the kiss, pulled back to rest his forehead against hers. "Not like this," he rasped. "Not when you might regret it. You've been hurt enough." Clara wanted to scream her frustration, but she saw the pain in his eyes, the fear of becoming another man who used her. So she stepped back, nodded. "When I come to you," she said quietly, "it won't be from gratitude or desperation. It will be because I choose you. Jonas Creed, only you." He caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. "I'll wait," he promised. "However long you need." The snow fell heavier as November approached. They were cut off from the world, locked in their private sanctuary. And in that isolation, Clara began to heal. Not just from DeWitt's cruelty, but from years of being seen as only her potential use to others. Jonas looked at her and saw her, simply Clara, complete in herself. She found herself humming as she worked, sleeping without nightmares, laughing at Jonas's dry observations, and sometimes, in the firelight, she caught him smiling, not the bitter twist she'd first known, but something genuine and wondering. "What?" she asked one evening, looking up from her mending. "Nothing, just—" He shook his head. "Never thought I'd know peace again. Then you came along and made this place feel less like hiding and more like living." Clara set aside her sewing and went to him, settling naturally into his arms. They sat like that often now, her head on his chest, his chin resting on her hair, not pushing for more, but no longer denying the comfort of connection. "Do you think about after?" she asked quietly. "When winter breaks?" His arms tightened slightly. "Try not to. I do." She traced patterns on his shirt. "I think about staying, about making this life work somehow. Clara, I can't offer you anything, no security, no future. You offer me yourself." She interrupted. "That's more than anyone else ever has." Jonas cupped her face, studying her with those intense dark eyes. How did a Boston lady learn to see so clear? "A Wyoming outlaw taught me." She smiled. He kissed her then, soft and achingly tender. When they parted, Clara saw his walls had finally, fully fallen. In his eyes was everything he couldn't say: love, fear, hope, desperation. "Spring's a long way off," he said finally. "Yes, Clara agreed, settling back against his chest. A long way. Outside, the snow continued to fall, sealing them away from a world that would condemn them both. But inside their rough cabin, beside their small fire, they had found something worth more than social acceptance or legal standing. They had found each other. The rifle kicked against Clara's shoulder, and the tin can flew off the fence post 50 yards away. Jonas nodded approvingly, the closest thing to praise in his vocabulary of gestures. Better, you're anticipating the recoil now instead of fighting it. Clara lowered the Winchester, proud of her progress. 2 months in Jonas's world had transformed her. Her hands, once soft from embroidery, now bore calluses from chopping wood and working leather. Her aim had grown steady, her movements sure. Again, Jonas instructed, setting up another target. She appreciated these lessons for more than their practical value. When Jonas taught, he stood close behind her, hands guiding her stance, breath warm against her ear. It was the only time he allowed such proximity during daylight hours. The shot went wide. Clara cursed, something else she'd learned in Wyoming. You're distracted, Jonas observed, a slight smile playing at his scarred mouth. Wonder why, she muttered, very aware of his chest pressed against her back. He chuckled, a rare sound that sent warmth spiraling through her. Focus, Boston. The world won't wait while you wool gather. Clara forced her attention back to the target, pushing down the ever-present awareness of him. These months had been sweet torture, living so intimately, yet maintaining careful boundaries. She understood his restraint, even respected it, but some nights, listening to him move about below her loft, she wanted to scream with frustration. After practice, they rode out to check Jonas's trap lines. The November sky threatened snow, gray and heavy as wool. Clara had learned to read weather like she once read books, intimately, with total attention. Out here, misreading signs meant death. They worked in companionable silence, Jonas showing her how to reset traps, how to skin rabbits cleanly. These moments of shared labor felt like marriage more than any ceremony could. 2 people carving out existence together, each anticipating the other's needs. Storm coming, Jonas said, studying the northwestern horizon. Big one. We should head back. They pushed the horses harder than usual, racing the weather. The first fat flakes began falling as they reached the canyon entrance. By the time they'd tended the horses and secured everything outside, the wind howled like a living thing. Inside, Jonas built up the fire while Clara started supper. Their movements were a practiced dance now, efficient and unconscious. She no longer asked where things were or what needed doing. This life, so foreign mere months ago, had become her truth. Could last days, Jonas said, watching the snow drive sideways past the window. Hope you're not tired of my company yet. Never, Clara said softly. He looked at her across the room, and she saw her own longing reflected in his dark eyes. Then he turned away, busying himself with unnecessary tasks. After dinner, Clara brought down one of his few books, Shakespeare's sonnets. Worn from handling. Read to me? It had become their ritual during storms. Jonas's rough voice handling the delicate words created a contrast that never failed to move her. He read of love and time and loss while wind rattled the walls, and Clara let the words wash over her like water. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Jonas read, Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. Clara watched his face in the firelight, mapping each line and scar. When had this dangerous stranger become her whole world? When had home stopped meaning Boston and started meaning wherever Jonas Creed happened to be? The storm raged for 3 days. They passed the time with cards, stories, and the 1,000 small tasks of survival. Clara learned Jonas had a gift for whittling, creating delicate animals from pine scraps. He discovered she could sing, coaxing out half-remembered ballads her mother had taught her. On the 3rd night, cabin fever set in. The walls seemed to press closer. Jonas paced like a caged wolf, while Clara tried to focus on mending. The tension that always simmered between them boiled near the surface. I need air, Jonas announced abruptly. reaching for his coat. In this? Clara gestured at the white fury outside. You'll freeze. Better than… He cut himself off, jaw clenched. Better than what? Clara stood, anger flashing. Better than spending another moment trapped with me? That's not… Jonas ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. You don't understand. Then explain. I'm tired of half-words and turnbacks. What are you so afraid of? You! The word exploded from him. I'm afraid of you, of what you make me want, every damn minute. I think about… And if I give in, if I let myself have what I want, I'll ruin you. Like I ruin everything I touch. Clara crossed to him in quick strides. I'm already ruined. Remember? The whole town of Cheyenne made sure of that. You're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen something worth saving. Clara… No. She pressed her hands against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palms. I've waited. I've been patient, but I won't let you hide behind nobility anymore. You want me. I want you. Why are we wasting time we might not have? Jonas caught her hands, holding them still against his chest. Because you deserve courting. Flowers and pretty words and promises I can keep, not some outlaw's bed in a hidden canyon. I don't want flowers. Clara's voice broke with frustration. I want you, just you, as you are. Can't you understand? You gave me something worth more than any proper courtship. You gave me myself. She pulled free and stepped back, suddenly exhausted. But if you can't see that, if you insist on protecting me from my own choices, then maybe you're right. Maybe this is impossible. Clara turned toward the ladder, but Jonas caught her wrist, spinning her back. His control finally shattered completely. He crushed her against him, his kiss desperate and hungry. Clara melted into him. Months of denied desire pouring out, they broke apart, breathing hard. Jonas's hands shook as he framed her face. You're sure? His voice was raw. Because if we do this, Clara, I won't be able to let you go. Right or wrong, you'll be mine. I've been yours since you crashed through that window, Clara whispered. I just waited for you to realize it. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to his bedroll by the fire. The storm howled outside, but Clara heard only her own heartbeat as Jonas laid her down with infinite care. So beautiful, he murmured, tracing her face with wondering fingers. How are you real? Clara pulled him down for another kiss, pouring all her love and frustration into it. When they parted, she began unbuttoning his shirt with steady hands. Show me, she said softly. Show me what we've been missing. Jonas caught her hands, kissing each palm. Slowly. We have all night, all winter. I want to memorize every moment. He was true to his word. With infinite patience, he worshipped her with hands and mouth, mapping every curve and hollow. Clara had never imagined such tenderness could exist alongside such passion. Jonas touched her like she was precious, irreplaceable, even as desire turned his dark eyes black. When he finally joined with her, Clara understood what she'd been missing her whole life. Not just physical pleasure, though that crashed over her in waves, but the connection, the feeling of being truly seen, known, accepted, loved. They moved together in ancient rhythm while the storm raged outside. Clara had never felt so wild, so free. She was no longer the proper Boston lady or the scorned woman of Cheyenne. She was simply herself, claiming what she wanted with fierce joy. Afterwards, they lay entwined before the fire, sweat cooling on their skin. Jonas traced lazy patterns on Clara's back, seemingly unable to stop touching her now that the barrier had fallen. Regrets? He asked quietly. Clara lifted her head from his chest to meet his eyes. Only that we waited so long. He smiled then, full and genuine, transforming his harsh features. Fair point. They made love again as the night deepened, slower this time, savoring each touch and taste. Clara felt reborn, remade by his hands and mouth and the reverent way he whispered her name. When dawn came, the storm had passed. Weak sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating their tangled forms. Jonas stirred first, pressing kisses to Clara's shoulder. Morning, he rumbled. Hmm? Clara stretched against him, delighting in his quick intake of breath. Is it? Minx. He nipped her ear playfully. What have I created? A very satisfied woman, Clara said, then laughed at his pleased expression. They rose reluctantly. The cabin cold despite the banked fire, but even the mundane tasks of morning felt different now. Each casual touch sparked memory of the night's passion. When Jonas handed her coffee, their fingers lingered. When Clara passed behind him, she couldn't resist trailing her hand across his shoulders. Keep that up and we'll never get anything done, Jonas warned, but his eyes were warm. Would that be so terrible? He pulled her onto his lap. Coffee forgotten. You're going to be the death of me. Clara Whitmore. What a way to go, she murmured against his lips. The days that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. The physical intimacy unlocked something in Jonas, a playfulness she'd only glimpsed before. He smiled more, touched her freely, even laughed at her terrible jokes. The cabin rang with their combined contentment. They made love everywhere. In the loft, by the fire, once memorably in the barn when checking the horses turned into something else entirely. Clara felt wanton, insatiable, finally understanding why proper society feared female desire. If they knew what they were missing, she thought wickedly. Watching Jonas chop wood shirtless despite the cold, the whole social order would collapse. But it was the quiet moments that carved deepest into her heart. Jonas reading to her with her head in his lap, fingers combing through her hair, teaching her to braid leather while she sat between his knees, the way he said her name in the darkness, like a prayer of thanksgiving. One night, as they lay spent and drowsing, Jonas spoke into the quiet. Never thought I'd have this, he said. Thought I'd forfeited any chance at happiness when I chose revenge. Clara turned in his arms to face him. You didn't choose revenge. You chose justice for someone you loved. There's no shame in that. The law would disagree. The law hanged an innocent boy, Clara said fiercely. I don't much care for its opinions. Jonas was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, what happens when spring comes? It was the question they'd both been avoiding. Clara knew their winter idyll couldn't last forever. The world waited beyond their canyon, full of bounty hunters and judgment. We'll face it together, she said simply. Whatever comes, I won't let them take you down with me. If I'm caught, then I'll hire lawyers. I'll petition governors. I'll raise hell itself if I have to. Clara gripped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You saved me. Jonas Creed. In every way a person can be saved. Did you really think I'd abandon you to face your demons alone? Clara. Her name broke from him like a sob. I don't deserve you. Too bad, she said, kissing him fiercely. You're stuck with me now. He made love to her then with desperate tenderness, as if trying to pour all his unspoken feelings into her body. Clara met him passion for passion, their joining a vow stronger than any marriage ceremony. December deepened, bringing brutal cold that turned their breath to frost. But inside their sanctuary, Clara and Jonas created their own warmth. She learned to make rabbit stew that actually tasted good. He taught her to track deer in fresh snow. They worked and laughed and loved with the freedom of people who'd found their match against all odds. Sometimes Clara remembered her old life, the concerts and teas, the rustle of silk, the careful social dance. It seemed like another woman's existence, pale and bloodless compared to this vivid reality. She wouldn't trade a single moment with Jonas for all the respectability in Boston. No regrets? Jonas asked one night, echoing his earlier question. Clara looked around their humble cabin, at the man she loved more than life, at the simple hearth that held more warmth than any mansion, and smiled. Never, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Not one. The first sign of trouble came with fresh horse tracks in the snow. Jonas found them while checking his perimeter traps, and his face went grim as granite when he returned to the cabin. Pack light, he told Clara without preamble. We're leaving. Clara didn't question him. 3 months in his world had taught her to read danger in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. She gathered their essentials while Jonas saddled the horses, working with silent efficiency. "How many?" she asked as they mounted up. "4, maybe 5, day old. But heading this direction?" Jonas scanned the canyon walls. Could be hunters. Could be worse. They rode hard through deepening twilight, Jonas leading them through paths Clara hadn't known existed. The temperature plummeted as darkness fell, and soon snow began drifting down, covering their tracks. "Small mercies," Jonas muttered, glancing back. They pushed through the night, stopping only to rest the horses. Clara's world narrowed to the rhythm of hoofbeats, the bite of wind on her face, the solid presence of Jonas beside her. Boston seemed like something she'd dreamed, a soft fantasy that had no place in this harsh reality. Dawn found them high in the mountains. In country so rough, Clara wondered how Jonas navigated it. He led them to a shallow cave, really just an overhang of rock, where they could rest and observe their back trail. "Anything?" Clara asked, accepting the jerky he handed her. "Not yet, but they'll come." Jonas's expression was bleak. "I stayed too long in one place, got comfortable, careless, happy." Clara corrected. "You got happy. There's no shame in that." He looked at her with such raw love it took her breath away. "No," he agreed quietly. "No shame in loving you." They dozed fitfully through the day, taking turns watching. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Jonas spotted movement far below, riders picking their way up the trail they'd used. "Bounty hunters," he said, passing Clara the field glasses. "The one in front is Jake Thornton. He's good." Clara studied the men through the glasses. They looked hard, competent, well-armed. "What do we do?" "We run." Jonas was already packing. "Stay ahead of them until we can lose them in the Badlands." But the hunters were skilled too. For 3 days, Clara and Jonas played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the frozen wilderness. They doubled back, laid false trails, used every trick Jonas knew, but always, inexorably. The hunters found their trace again. On the 4th night, exhausted and running low on supplies, they took shelter in a grove of cottonwoods by a frozen stream. The horses were spent, stumbling with fatigue. Jonas's face was haggard in the firelight. "They're hurting us," he said quietly, "pushing us toward the open country where we can't hide." Clara moved to sit beside him, taking his gloved hand in hers. "Then we stop running." "Clara." "No, listen to me." She gripped his hand tighter. "You're exhausted. The horses are done. If we keep running, they'll catch us when we're too weak to fight. Better to face them on ground we choose." Jonas studied her face. "When did you become a tactician?" "When I fell in love with an outlaw." She managed to smile despite her fear. "So what would Jonas Creed do if he wasn't worried about protecting me?" A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. "I'd find a defensible position and make them come to me. Then let's do that." They found what they needed 2 hours later. A box canyon with only one entrance. Good cover. And a spring that wasn't completely frozen. Jonas set about preparing their defense with grim efficiency, while Clara tended the horses and refilled their canteens. "They'll wait for dawn," Jonas predicted, checking his weapons. "Try to talk first. See if they can take me alive. Higher bounty that way." "They can try," Clara said, loading the rifle he'd taught her to use. Jonas caught her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "If this goes bad, you tell them I forced you, that you were my prisoner." "I will not. Clara, please." His voice broke. "I can face dying. I can't face watching them hurt you." She pulled his head down, kissing him fiercely. "Then we'll have to make sure it doesn't go bad." They spent the night in each other's arms, not speaking of last times or final moments. When dawn pearled the eastern sky, Jonas positioned Clara behind solid cover with extra ammunition and a clear field of fire. "Remember what I taught you," he said. "Breathe steady. Squeeze, don't pull. Make every shot count." "Jonas?" She caught his sleeve as he turned away. "I love you." He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone in that achingly familiar gesture. "And I love you. Clara Whitmore, more than life." The hunters announced themselves an hour after sunrise. Jake Thornton's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "Jonas Creed, we've got you boxed. Come out peaceful-like and nobody has to die today." "Counteroffer," Jonas called back. "You ride away and I don't put holes in you." "Can't do that. Friend, $5,000 says I take you back to Laramie. That's enough to set a man up proper." "Blood money," Jonas spat. "You know I never killed anyone, wasn't trying to kill me first. Not my concern. You coming out, or do we dig you out?" Jonas glanced at Clara, saw her nod of readiness. "Come ahead then. See how much that bounty's really worth to you?" The attack came fast. 3 men rushed the canyon entrance while 2 provided covering fire. Jonas dropped 1 immediately. Clara wounded another. The survivors scrambled for cover. "Reassessing." "You've got help in there," Thornton called, sounding surprised. "That's going to make this messier than it needs to be." The siege settled into a pattern. The hunters would probe, trying different angles. Jonas and Clara would drive them back, but ammunition wasn't infinite, and the hunters knew it. As afternoon wore on, one hunter worked his way to an elevated position, forcing Clara to keep her head down. Jonas tried to flank him, but took a bullet in the shoulder, spinning him back behind cover. "Jonas!" Clara started toward him. "Stay put!" He pressed his hand to the wound, blood seeping between his fingers. "I'm all right." But he wasn't. Clara could see that. The wound was bad, bleeding freely. Jonas's face had gone gray beneath his tan. Still he kept fighting, switching to his left hand with practiced ease. Near sunset. Thornton tried again. "This is foolish. Creed. You're wounded, probably dying. Your woman's going to watch you bleed out for nothing. Give up now and I'll see she gets safe passage to wherever she wants." "Go to hell," Clara shouted before Jonas could answer. "I'm not his woman, I'm his partner, and we'll die together before we trust your word." A surprised silence. Then, "Ma'am, you don't know what you're saying. This man's a criminal. You help him and you're one too." "Good," Clara called back. "I'd rather be a criminal with him than respectable without him." Jonas looked at her with wondering eyes. "Damn, I love you," he whispered. The final assault came at twilight. All 4 remaining hunters rushed at once, counting on numbers and Jonas's wound to overwhelm them. Clara fired steadily, mechanically, everything Jonas had taught her flowing together. She dropped 1 man, wounded another, but they kept coming. Jonas struggled to reload with blood-slick fingers. A hunter rounded his cover, gun rising. Clara swung her rifle, shooting without conscious thought. The man crumpled. Then Jake Thornton was there, kicking Jonas's gun away, pistol aimed at his head. "End of the line, Creed." "No!" Clara trained her rifle on Thornton, but her hands shook. At this distance, she might hit Jonas. "Easy, miss." Thornton didn't look at her, keeping his eyes on Jonas. "Lower the gun. It's over." "Clara, do what he says," Jonas said quietly. Blood had soaked his entire left side. "I won't let them take you. You have to." Jonas's eyes found hers, full of love and resignation. "Live, Clara, for both of us." Thornton's finger tightened on the trigger. Clara saw it happening with crystalline clarity. Jonas about to die, her world about to end. Without thought, she fired. Jake Thornton looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. Surprised, his gun wavered, dropped. He folded slowly to his knees, then pitched forward. The canyon fell silent except for the moaning of wounded men. Clara ran to Jonas, dropping beside him, hands pressing against his wound. "Why?" Jonas gripped her hand weakly. "Now you're a killer too. They'll never stop hunting you." "Then we'll run together." Tears streamed down her face. "Don't you dare die on me, Jonas Creed. Not now, not after everything." He managed a ghost of his crooked smile. "Bossy woman, always telling me what to do. Working with desperate efficiency." Clara bound Jonas's wound, packed snow around it to slow the bleeding. 2 of the hunters were dead, 2 wounded but alive. She disarmed them, took their horses, left them water and basic supplies. You get one chance, she told them coldly. Crawl back to whatever hole you came from. Tell them Jonas Creed and his woman are off limits. Come after us again and I'll kill you all. Loading Jonas onto his horse nearly broke her heart. He swayed, barely conscious, kept upright only by her steadying hand. But they had to move. More hunters would come. Drawn by the promise of bounty, Clara led them through the frozen darkness, following Jonas's delirious directions. He mumbled about a place, somewhere safe, an old trapper's cabin he'd found years ago. She pushed on through exhaustion and terror, knowing if she stopped, if she gave in to despair, they'd both die. Near dawn, as Jonas burned with fever against her back, Clara spotted it, a ramshackle structure nearly buried in snow, invisible unless you knew where to look. She dragged Jonas inside, started a fire with numb fingers, and began the long fight to save his life. For 2 days he hovered between living and dying. Clara cleaned and dressed his wound obsessively, forced water and broth between his cracked lips, bathed his fevered skin. She talked constantly, reminding him of their love, their plans, all the life they had yet to live. "Don't you leave me," she whispered over and over. "You promised. Jonas, you said if we did this, you wouldn't let me go. Keep your promise." On the 3rd dawn, Jonas's fever broke. His eyes opened, focused and aware. "Clara!" She burst into tears, clutching his hand. "You stubborn man. You scared me." "Sorry." He lifted his good hand to touch her face. "You saved me. We saved each other." Clara kissed his palm. That's what partners do. As Jonas recovered, they talked about the future with new urgency. They couldn't stay hidden forever. The bodies in the canyon would be found. The price on their heads would grow. "Mexico," Jonas said one night. "I've got money hidden, enough to start over, buy a little ranch, raise horses. Nobody would know us there. Together, always together." He pulled her close with his good arm. "If you'll have me, I'm offering you a hard life." Clara, always looking over our shoulders, never truly safe. Clara thought of Boston, of respectability, of the cage she'd escaped. Then she looked at Jonas, scarred, wanted, offering her nothing but himself and a difficult freedom. "Yes," she said simply. "Forever, yes." They stayed 2 more weeks while Jonas healed enough to travel. Clara ventured out for supplies, always careful, always watching. The wanted posters appeared as expected. Jonas's bounty doubled. A new one for her. Clara Whitmore, murderess and consort to outlaws, armed and dangerous. "Dangerous," Clara muttered, studying her reflection in the store window. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the Boston lady who'd stepped off a stage in Cheyenne. This woman was lean, hard, capable, a survivor, a killer. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, she felt only fierce satisfaction. She'd protected what was hers. She'd chosen her path with eyes wide open. When Jonas was strong enough, they packed their few belongings and turned south. At the top of the last ridge, they paused to look back at the wilderness that had sheltered them. "Regrets?" Jonas asked, echoing his old question. Clara thought of Jake Thornton's surprised face, the weight of the rifle in her hands, the line she'd crossed. Then she looked at Jonas, alive beside her, their future spreading before them like an unmarked trail. "Never," she said, and meant it. "Let's go home." They rode into the rising sun, 2 outlaws bound by love and blood, leaving the past behind. Whatever waited in Mexico, whatever challenges they'd face, they'd meet them together, partners in crime, in love, in life. The frontier had made them both, broken and remade them. Now it was time to write their own ending, far from those who would judge them. Clara Whitmore, proper Boston lady, was dead. In her place rode someone harder and softer both, a woman who'd found herself in the wilderness and the arms of an outlaw, and she'd never been more alive. The abandoned cabin stood like a skeleton against the March sky, its walls groaning under the weight of neglect and weather. Jonas guided them to it with the certainty of a man returning to a familiar grave. His shoulder still pained him, though the wound had closed cleanly thanks to Clara's care. "We can rest here a few days," he said, dismounting carefully. "Used to belong to a trapper named McGill, dead 10 years now." Clara surveyed their temporary shelter, already calculating what needed doing. 3 months of running had honed her to sharp practicality. Every abandoned structure was evaluated for defense, water access, and escape routes. Romance had no place in survival. Inside, evidence of their predecessor's life lingered. Tin plates on a shelf, a rusted coffee pot, books swollen with moisture. Clara built a fire while Jonas tended the horses, their movements a practiced dance of efficiency. "Found these," Jonas said later, producing several letters from behind a loose board. McGill's cash. Never could read, so he kept every piece of paper that came his way. Clara examined the yellowed envelopes by lamplight. Most were years old, addressed to various people across the territory. But one made her breath catch. It bore her sister Margaret's handwriting. "What is it?" Jonas moved behind her, instantly alert to her tension. "This letter, it's from my sister, but it's addressed to someone named Mrs. Caroline Foster in Denver." Clara's hands trembled as she opened it, scanning the contents. "Oh God, Margaret's been looking for me. She hired investigators. This Mrs. Foster was one of them." The letter was dated 2 months ago. Margaret wrote of her desperation to find her missing sister, of their father's declining health and his regret over forcing the engagement with DeWitt. She begged for any information about Clara's whereabouts. "Your family thinks you're dead," Jonas said quietly. "Maybe it's better that way." Clara folded the letter carefully. "What could I tell them? That I'm alive but wanted for murder? That I've chosen to live as an outlaw's woman?" Jonas turned her to face him. "You could go back. Without me. I could write a statement saying I forced you, that you were never willing." "Stop." Clara pressed her fingers to his lips. "We've had this discussion. I chose this life. I chose you, but—" She looked at the letter again. "I hate that Margaret suffers not knowing." They debated through the night. Jonas argued for Clara's return to civilization, painting himself as the villain who'd corrupted her. Clara countered with the truth, that she'd found herself in this harsh life, that returning to Boston's cage would kill her as surely as any bullet. Finally, as dawn approached, they reached a compromise. Clara would write to Margaret, using Mrs. Foster as an intermediary. She wouldn't reveal her location or circumstances, only that she lived and had found happiness. The letter took 3 drafts. "My dearest Margaret, I am alive and well, though the path I've chosen prevents me from returning home. Please tell Father I harbor no anger over past events. I've found a life that suits me, rough though it may be, and a man who sees my worth beyond society's measures. Do not search for me further. It would bring only danger to all involved. Know that I am happy, truly happy, for the first time in my life. I think of you often and carry your love with me always. Your sister, Clara." Jonas posted the letter in the next town, using assumed names and circuitous routing. They never stayed anywhere long enough to receive a reply, but Clara felt lighter knowing Margaret would have answers. However, incomplete. Spring came late to the high country, but when it arrived, the world exploded into color. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows they crossed, and snowmelt turned every stream into a rushing torrent. They were only a week from the Mexican border when Jonas spotted dust on their back trail. "How many?" Clara asked, already knowing they'd have to run again. "Too many." Jonas's face was grim. "A whole posse. Looks like someone's upped the stakes." They pushed hard through brutal country, trying to lose their pursuers in a maze of canyons and mesas. But this group was different, organized, well-supplied, relentless. Every trick Jonas employed, they countered. Every false trail was uncovered. "It's like they know how I think," Jonas muttered on the 3rd night, studying their back trail. The answer came with dawn. A rider approached their camp under a white flag, keeping his hands visible. Jonas recognized him immediately. His former partner, Will Tanner. the one who'd betrayed him. "That's close enough, Judas," Jonas called, rifle steady. Will stopped 30 yards out. "Jonas, Miss Whitmore, I come with an offer. The only offer I want from you involves your grave." Jonas spat. "Hear me out." Will's ferret face showed strain. "There's been a development. Samuel DeWitt's put up private money, $10,000 for you both. But here's the thing. The railroad's also interested. Seems they've lost some shipments lately and think you're involved." "We haven't robbed anyone in months," Clara said coldly. "I know that. You know that. But DeWitt's got influence, and he wants you bad. Especially her." Will's eyes flicked to Clara. "Seems he don't like being made a fool of. Woman choosing an outlaw over him. His pride can't take it." Jonas's finger tightened on the trigger. "Get to the point before I lose patience. There's another way. The governor's offering amnesty for information about the Garrison gang. They hit a train last month, killed 6 guards. You help bring them in. You both get pardoned. Clean slate. You expect us to trust you?" Clara laughed bitterly. "You already sold Jonas once. I'm not proud of that." Will actually looked ashamed. "But this is real. I've got the papers here. Governor's seal and all." Jonas considered, then shook his head. "Even if it's not a trap, I won't buy freedom with another man's life. We'll take our chances in Mexico." Will's expression hardened. "Then you're fools. That posse's got you boxed. They know about Mexico. Got men waiting at every border crossing. You'll never make it. We'll see about that." Jonas gestured with his rifle. "Now ride out before I forget you came under truce." Will turned his horse but called back. "They're planning to take you tonight. Full moon, clear weather. Thought you should know, for old time's sake." After he left, Clara and Jonas prepared for siege. They found a defensible position among a cluster of massive boulders, with good sight lines and multiple escape routes. As darkness fell, they waited. The attack came from 3 sides simultaneously. The posse had indeed planned well, but they'd underestimated their quarry. Jonas and Clara fought with desperate efficiency, their partnership seamless. When Jonas's rifle jammed, Clara covered him without need for words. When men tried to flank Clara's position, Jonas anticipated and cut them off. But numbers told. For every man they dropped, 2 more seemed to appear. Their ammunition ran low, then lower. A lucky shot grazed Clara's temple, sending her reeling. "Clara!" Jonas reached for her, exposing himself. A rifle cracked, and he spun, clutching his side. "No!" Clara dragged him behind cover, blood streaming from both their wounds. This was how it would end. Then, not in Mexico's freedom, but in a nameless cluster of rocks, hunted like animals. "Listen to me!" Jonas gasped, pressing his Colt into her hands. 2 shots left. Don't let them take you alive. DeWitt, he'll make an example. Then we go together. Clara checked the chambers. 2 bullets, just as he'd said. 1 for each of them. On 3, Jonas pulled her close, kissing her fiercely through their mingled blood. "I love you, Clara Whitmore. Best thing that ever happened to me. And I love you, Jonas Creed." She smiled through her tears. "No regrets." They positioned themselves, guns ready. The posse was closing in, calling for surrender. Clara met Jonas's eyes, saw her own peace reflected there. They'd lived on their own terms. They'd die the same way. 1, Jonas counted. 2! The night exploded into chaos. New gunfire erupted, but not aimed at them. The posse members shouted in confusion, turning to face an unexpected threat. Riders poured from the darkness, hard-faced men who moved like shadows, cutting through the posse with ruthless efficiency. "What the hell?" Jonas struggled to see through the gun smoke. A familiar figure materialized from the chaos. McGill, the trapper they'd thought dead 10 years, very much alive, grizzled and scarred but grinning. "Thought you might need help," he said casually, as if discussing weather. "That letter you posted caused quite a stir. Mrs. Foster turned out to be more than just an investigator. She's got connections to people who remember what DeWitt did to your brother. Jonas, people who'd like to see justice done. The shooting was already dying down. The posse, caught between two forces, had scattered or surrendered. McGill's men, whoever they were, moved with military precision, disarming survivors and treating wounded. "I don't understand," Clara said, still clutching Jonas as if he might vanish. McGill chuckled. "Let's just say not everyone believes the law's version of justice. Some of us remember when Jonas scouted for the army, saved wagon trains, helped folks. And we sure as hell remember what happened to young Tom Creed." A dignified woman in traveling clothes approached, picking her way carefully through the battlefield. Despite the circumstances, she maintained an air of Eastern refinement that Clara recognized immediately. "Miss Whitmore, I'm Caroline Foster." She extended a gloved hand as if they stood in a Boston parlor rather than a killing ground. "Your sister hired me, yes, but I've taken something of a personal interest in your case." "Why?" Clara asked, bewildered. "Because 20 years ago, Samuel DeWitt destroyed my father with false accusations and forged documents. I've waited a long time for someone brave enough to stand against him publicly." "Mrs. Foster smiled coldly. "You and Mr. Creed have given me that opportunity." Over the next hour, as wounds were tended and explanations given, the full picture emerged. Mrs. Foster had used Margaret's search as cover for her own investigation. She'd gathered evidence of DeWitt's past crimes, his bribing of officials, the false charges against Tom Creed. McGill, who'd faked his death to escape DeWitt's reach years ago, had assembled a network of similar victims. The governor's amnesty offer was real. "Mrs. Foster explained, "but not for turning in the Garrison gang, for testifying against DeWitt and his web of corruption. With your testimonies and our evidence, we can destroy him." Jonas and Clara exchanged looks, hardly daring to hope. "And if we refuse?" Jonas asked. "Then you're free to go," McGill said simply. "We'll hold the posse until you're clear. Mexico's still there if you want it." Clara thought of all they'd endured, the running, the hiding, the violence that had marked their love from the beginning. Then she thought of true justice, not just for them but for Tom and all DeWitt's victims. "We'll testify," she said firmly. Jonas nodded agreement. The journey back to Cheyenne took a week, their strange convoy drawing stares at every settlement. Clara rode beside Jonas, their hands often touching, reassuring themselves of the other's presence. The wanted posters still proclaimed them outlaws, but now they had protection, hope, purpose beyond mere survival. "Scared?" Jonas asked the night before they'd reached Cheyenne. "Terrified," Clara admitted, "but not of DeWitt or trials or whatever comes next. I'm scared of losing us, who we became out here." Jonas dismounted and lifted her down, holding her close. "We're not those people who met in Cheyenne anymore. We've been forged by fire. You and I, nothing can change that." They made love under the stars, tender and desperate, as if storing up sensation against an uncertain future. When Clara cried out her release, it echoed off canyon walls that had witnessed their transformation from strangers to partners to something beyond naming. Afterward, lying in Jonas's arms, Clara watched the wheeling stars. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and testimony, confrontations with the past they'd fled. But tonight, they were still just Jonas and Clara, two outlaws who'd found redemption in each other. "Whatever happens," Jonas murmured against her hair, "I need you to know, you saved me, not just from bullets or hanging, but from becoming the monster they painted me as. You saw the man I could be." Clara turned in his arms, kissing him softly. "And you showed me I was never worthless, just waiting for someone to see my true worth." They held each other as dawn approached, ready to face Judgment Day together. The frontier had tested them, broken and remade them. Now civilization would try to tame them, fit them back into acceptable boxes. But Clara smiled, feeling Jonas's heartbeat against her chest. They'd faced worse than society's disapproval. They'd walked through fire and emerged stronger. Whatever came next, they'd meet it as they'd met everything else, together, unashamed, and absolutely certain of each other. The sun rose over Cheyenne's rooftops, painting the sky in shades of hope and challenge. Clara and Jonas rode toward it side by side, no longer running but advancing, ready to claim the justice so long denied. Their love had been born in darkness and tested by violence. Now it would face its greatest trial, the harsh light of civilization's scrutiny. But Clara felt no fear, only fierce determination. They'd earned their happy ending with blood and tears and unwavering devotion. Now they just had to survive long enough to claim it. The hotel room in Cheyenne felt like a cage after months of open sky. Clara paced its confines while Jonas sat by the window, watching the street below with the wariness of a hunted animal. They'd been given adjoining rooms, but neither could bear the separation. Clara's belongings remained untouched in her assigned quarters. "DeWitt knows we're here," Jonas said quietly. "His men have been circling like buzzards since we arrived." Clara joined him at the window, noting the poorly concealed watchers. "Let them watch. We have protection now." "For how long?" Jonas turned to her, and she saw the strain in his eyes. "What happens after the trial? You think DeWitt will just accept defeat?" Before Clara could answer, a knock interrupted. Mrs. Foster entered, accompanied by a young man with intelligent eyes and ink-stained fingers. "This is Michael Hardy," she announced, "the finest lawyer in the territory, and more importantly, one who can't be bought." Hardy studied them with frank curiosity. "I've read your statements. Compelling. But DeWitt has deep pockets and deeper connections. We'll need more than words to bring him down." "What about the evidence of my brother's innocence?" Jonas demanded. "Useful, but complicated by your subsequent actions." Hardy spread papers on the small table. "The train robbery muddies the waters. DeWitt's lawyers will paint you as a vengeful criminal trying to destroy a respectable businessman." "Respectable," Clara spat the word. "He publicly humiliated me, drove me to take up with an outlaw," Hardy finished gently. "That's how they'll frame it. A fallen woman's revenge fantasy. We need to be prepared for character assassination." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of preparation. Hardy drilled them relentlessly. Anticipating every attack, every twist DeWitt's lawyers might employ, Clara learned to control her anger when DeWitt's name arose, to speak calmly of humiliations that still burned. Jonas struggled more, his instinct for direct action at odds with legal maneuvering. Between sessions, they walked the streets under guard, relearning civilization's rhythms. Clara noticed how people stared, some with curiosity, others with contempt. The story had spread. The proper Eastern lady who chose an outlaw over prosperity. Women whispered behind fans. Men's gazes lingered too long. "I hate this," Jonas muttered after a particularly bold shopkeeper refused Clara service. "Out there, we were just ourselves. Here, we're a scandal." "Would you go back?" Clara asked. "Leave all this, run for Mexico tonight?" Jonas stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "In a heartbeat, if you asked. But I know you need this. Justice. Vindication. So we stay." Clara kissed him there on the street, ignoring shocked gasps from passers-by. 3 more days. Then, whatever happens, we're free." That night, unable to sleep, they made love with desperate intensity. Every touch felt weighted with uncertainty. Every kiss a promise against an unknown future. When Jonas moved within her, Clara clung to him as if he might vanish with dawn. "I need to tell you something," Jonas said afterward, holding her close. "If this goes wrong, if they find a way to hang me anyway." "Don't," Clara pressed her hand over his heart. "We're going to win. We have truth on our side." "Truth doesn't always matter in a courtroom." He captured her hand, kissing her palm. "Promise me something. If they take me, you won't mourn forever. You'll live, really live. Find happiness. The only happiness I want is with you." Clara's voice broke. "Don't ask me to imagine a world without you in it." Jonas pulled her closer, and they held each other through the remaining darkness, each pretending not to feel the other's tears. The trial began on a Tuesday that dawned gray and threatening. The courthouse overflowed with spectators drawn by scandal and the promise of watching the mighty fall. Clara entered on Jonas's arm, wearing a simple but respectable dress, Mrs. Foster had procured. Jonas had reluctantly donned a suit, though he moved in it like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Samuel DeWitt sat with his battalion of lawyers, prosperous and pompous as ever. His eyes found Clara across the room, filled with such malice that Jonas stepped protectively closer. All rise for Judge Theodore Morrison. The bailiff called. Clara's heart sank. Morrison, the same judge who'd nearly married her to DeWitt. Hardy had tried to have him recused, but DeWitt's influence ran deep. The prosecutor, a thin man named Daniels, opened with expected attacks. Jonas Creed, train robber, killer, corrupter of innocent women. Clara Whitmore, desperate spinster who turned to violence rather than accept her proper place. Every word dripped contempt. Hardy countered brilliantly, painting a picture of corruption and cruelty that sent murmurs through the crowd. But Clara could see the judge's closed expression, the way certain jury members avoided their eyes. The defense calls Miss Clara Whitmore. Clara's legs trembled as she took the stand, but her voice remained steady as she recounted that horrible day in Cheyenne. The humiliation, the desperation, the moment Jonas had crashed through her window like salvation itself. "And did Mr. Creed force you to accompany him?" Hardy asked gently. "No, he saved my life and asked nothing in return. Every choice I made was my own." The cross-examination was brutal. Daniels implied she'd been DeWitt's lover, that her inability to bear children stemmed from disease rather than miscarriage. He painted her flight with Jonas as calculated, her love as mercenary. "Isn't it true," Daniels sneered, "that you killed Jake Thornton not to save Mr. Creed, but to prevent your own capture and return to respectability?" "I killed him," Clara said clearly, "because he was about to murder the man I love. I'd do it again." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Judge Morrison gavelled for order, but Clara caught something in his expression. Was it respect? Jonas testified next, his natural honesty shining through despite Daniel's attempts to twist his words. When asked about the train robbery, he admitted it freely but explained his desperate reasoning. The evidence of Tom's innocence, produced dramatically by Hardy, caused a sensation. But the trial's turning point came from an unexpected source, as Daniels pontificated about the sanctity of law and order. A voice rang out from the gallery. "That's rich, coming from DeWitt's bought dog." A woman stood, worn-looking, perhaps 40, with the bearing of someone who decided she had nothing left to lose. "Sit down, madam, or be removed," Morrison ordered. "I'll speak first." The woman faced the court defiantly. "I'm Ellen Graves. 15 years ago, DeWitt destroyed my husband with false accusations because we wouldn't sell our land. Where was law and order then?" The dam broke. Others stood, shouting their own stories of DeWitt's crimes. A merchant driven to bankruptcy, a farmer whose son was framed for theft, a widow whose husband died in suspicious circumstances after opposing DeWitt. Morrison pounded his gavel futilely as the courtroom erupted. DeWitt's face had gone purple, his lawyers frantically objecting. But the stories kept coming, years of buried grievances finally finding voice. "Clear the court," Morrison finally roared. When order was restored, only principals and a few journalists remained. The judge looked older, wearier, something shifting in his careful neutrality. "Mr. Hardy," he said slowly, "this is highly irregular." "Truth often is, Your Honor," Hardy replied. "My clients aren't the only ones seeking justice today." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'll allow testimony from these witnesses. Daniels, you may object to specific statements, but I want to hear what they have to say." What followed was devastating to DeWitt's case. Witness after witness detailed patterns of corruption, intimidation, and violence. Documents thought destroyed surfaced, including papers proving DeWitt had paid the original witnesses against Tom Creed. But DeWitt hadn't survived this long without resources. On the trial's 4th day, he made his move. Clara woke to find a note slipped under their door. Your sister Margaret arrives tomorrow on the morning stage. Accidents happen to stages. Withdraw your testimony or mourn another loss. A friend. Jonas found her sobbing. The note crumpled in her fist. His face went deadly calm as he read it. We can't let him hurt Margaret, Clara gasped. I'll withdraw. Say I lied. No. Jonas pulled her close. He's desperate, making mistakes. This note is evidence of witness tampering. They brought the threat to Hardy and Mrs. Foster, who immediately arranged protection for the incoming stage. But Clara couldn't shake her terror. She'd dragged Margaret into this through her letter. If anything happened, I know that look. Jonas said that night, you're thinking of running, taking the danger away from everyone else. Clara didn't deny it. Haven't we caused enough pain? Maybe we should have stayed hidden. Jonas turned her to face him. You remember what you told me that night I tried to leave you behind? You said we'd face things together. That hasn't changed. But Margaret will be protected, and she's coming because she loves you, because she wants to see you vindicated. Jonas kissed her forehead. Trust in that love. Trust in ours. The next morning, they waited at the stage depot with a small army of guards. Clara's heart hammered as the coach rolled in, dust-covered but intact. When Margaret stepped down, older, careworn, but undeniably her sister, Clara's composure shattered. They collided in a desperate embrace, both sobbing. Margaret pulled back to study Clara's face, taking in the changes months of hardship had wrought. My dear girl, she whispered, what you've endured, but you're alive. That's all that matters. I'm so sorry, Clara began, but Margaret silenced her. No, I'm sorry for Father, for not protecting you from that marriage arrangement. Margaret glanced at Jonas, who stood apart, giving them space. This is him? Clara nodded, suddenly nervous. What would her proper Boston sister think of her outlaw? Margaret approached Jonas with the directness Clara had always admired. Mr. Creed, I understand I owe you my sister's life. Jonas shifted uncomfortably. She saved herself. Ma'am, I just helped a little. Nevertheless, Margaret extended her hand, shocking everyone. Thank you for seeing her worth when the world was blind to it. That afternoon, Margaret testified. Her composed recitation of the family's manipulation of Clara, the pressures that drove her west, and DeWitt's cruel reputation even in Boston circles added weight to the prosecution's case. My sister was not a fallen woman taking up with criminals, Margaret declared firmly. She was a survivor who found love in the only man honorable enough to help without expectation. If that makes her an outlaw, then perhaps we need new laws. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Clara and Jonas waited in an anteroom, hands clasped, surrounded by their strange collection of allies. McGill told rough jokes to ease tension. Mrs. Foster maintained serene confidence. Margaret held Clara's other hand, anchoring her to family and hope. When the jury filed back, Clara couldn't breathe. Jonas's hand tightened on hers as the foreman stood. On the charge of murder against Miss Clara Whitmore, we find the defendant not guilty by reason of defense of another. Clara sagged against Jonas as the foreman continued. On the charges against Mr. Jonas Creed, we find extenuating circumstances merit consideration. While guilty of the train robbery, we recommend clemency given the corruption that drove his actions. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Miss Whitmore, you're free to go. Mr. Creed, given the jury's recommendation and the extraordinary evidence presented, I sentence you to time served. However, Clara's heart stopped. The matter of Mr. Samuel DeWitt requires immediate attention. Bailiff, place Mr. DeWitt under arrest pending investigation of multiple charges of corruption, bribery, and conspiracy. The courtroom exploded. DeWitt lunged to his feet, screaming about influence and retribution. But the bailiffs were already moving. As they dragged him past, his eyes found Clara. "You'll pay for this, whore! Both of you! I'll see you—" Jonas moved, but Clara caught his arm. "No, he's nothing now. Just a small man who measured worth in coins and control." They walked from the courthouse into afternoon sunshine, free for the first time since that night in a burning saloon. The crowd that gathered was different now, some still hostile, but many cheering, calling out support. "What now?" Clara asked, dizzy with possibility. Jonas smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his weathered features. Now we really live, together." "The ranch in Mexico?" Clara suggested, but Jonas shook his head. "Maybe someday, but I think—" He looked around at the people who'd fought for them, at Margaret beaming through tears, at the town that had witnessed their vindication. "I think we've been running long enough. Time to build something instead." That evening, in the hotel dining room, their odd fellowship gathered for celebration. Stories flowed with the wine. McGill's fake death, Mrs. Foster's patient revenge, the network of DeWitt's victims who'd waited years for justice. "To the outlaws." McGill raised his glass, grinning. "Who showed us law and love don't always walk the same path." As toasts rang out, Jonas leaned close to Clara. "Dance with me." There was no music, but Clara rose anyway. In the middle of that crowded room, surrounded by friends found in strangest circumstances, they swayed together. Clara rested her head on Jonas's chest, feeling his heartbeat. Strong and steady. "No regrets," he murmured, their private ritual. Clara lifted her head to meet his eyes, those dark, haunted eyes that had first seen her truly. "Never," she said, sealing it with a kiss that drew applause and a few scandalized gasps. "Not one single moment." Tomorrow would bring challenges. There would be those who'd never accept them, who'd always see an outlaw and his fallen woman. But tonight, in this room full of unlikely allies, with her sister's blessing and the man she loved in her arms, Clara felt the truth of their hard-won freedom. They'd been declared worthless by those who measured value in narrow terms. They'd found each other in the darkness and discovered their true worth, not in society's approval or wealth's accumulation, but in the fierce, unwavering choice to save each other. The outlaw and the lady, the gunman and the woman who refused to break. They'd written their own legend in blood and tears and desperate love. And their story, Clara knew with bone-deep certainty, was only beginning. Clara adjusted her spectacles as she bent over the law books, the lamplight casting long shadows across the small office she'd established above Hardy's practice. 6 months had passed since the trial, and she'd thrown herself into understanding the system that had nearly destroyed them. "You'll burn your eyes out," Jonas said from the doorway. "Holding 2 cups of coffee?" "Just one more chapter," Clara murmured, accepting the cup gratefully. "Hardy's having me research precedents for the Sanderson case." Jonas settled into the chair across from her desk, in her office, where she worked as Hardy's assistant while studying law. The transformation still amazed him. His Clara, who'd once worn silk and attended Boston soirees, now spent her days fighting for those the system ignored. "Margaret's letter came," he said, producing an envelope. "Thought you'd want to read it together." Clara's relationship with her sister had deepened through their correspondence. Margaret had returned to Boston but maintained fierce support for Clara's choices, even facing down their father's disapproval. "Dearest Clara," the letter began. "Father's health continues to decline, but he speaks of you often now with something approaching regret. The news of DeWitt's conviction and subsequent imprisonment reached Boston society with spectacular effect." Clara read aloud, sharing her sister's wry observations about social upheaval. DeWitt's empire had crumbled, his victims compensated from seized assets. Some had used the funds to rebuild. Others, like them, had chosen new paths entirely. She wants to visit again this summer, Clara noted, pleased. And she's bringing someone, a Mr. James Hartwell, a doctor, she says, who shares her views on women's capabilities. Good for Margaret. Jonas smiled. Though I pity any man trying to court a Whitmore woman, you're all forces of nature. Clara swatted him playfully, but sobered as she continued reading. Father wants to see me. He's apologizing. Says he understands now that my worth was never tied to what I could provide a husband. Will you go? Clara considered. The father who'd shipped her west like merchandise felt like a stranger. But Margaret wrote of his genuine transformation. Maybe, if you'll come with me. Boston Society receiving an outlaw? Jonas raised an eyebrow. That should be interesting. Former outlaw. Clara corrected. Now, a respectable ranch foreman who's courting the assistant to the territory's finest lawyer. It was true. Jonas had found work at the Morrison Ranch outside town. The judge, transformed by the trial's revelations, had offered the position personally. Jonas's skills with horses and his knowledge of the land made him invaluable, while the steady work satisfied his need for purpose. About that courting, Jonas said, suddenly serious. There's something I need to discuss. Clara's heart skipped. They'd lived as partners in all but law, but Jonas had insisted on proper courtship now that they were free. She found it both endearing and frustrating. The ranch is doing well. Jonas continued. Morrison's offered to let me buy in as a partner, with what I had saved and the compensation from DeWitt's assets. I could manage it. Jonas, that's wonderful. There's more. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, going to one knee beside her chair. Clara Whitmore, you've already saved me in every way that matters. Would you do me the honor of making it official? Inside the box lay a simple gold band with a single small diamond, nothing like the ostentatious ring DeWitt would have provided, but perfect in its honest beauty. Yes, Clara breathed, then louder, laughing through tears. Yes, Jonas Creed. I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her down for a kiss that started tender and quickly turned heated. Clara found herself in his lap, law books forgotten. We should wait, Jonas murmured against her throat. Do this proper. We've done everything backwards so far. Clara gasped as his hands wandered. Why stop now? But Jonas gentled his touch, holding her close but chaste. Because you deserve all the things I couldn't give you before. A real wedding, a proper home, a life in the open instead of hiding. Clara touched his face, scarred and weathered and beloved. I already have everything I need, but if it matters to you, we'll wait. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony that somehow perfectly captured their journey. Margaret came from Boston, glowing with happiness for her sister and accompanied by her doctor, who proved intelligent and kind. McGill stood as Jonas's best man, looking uncomfortable in his new suit but beaming with pride. Mrs. Foster, Hardy, and the collection of souls who'd fought beside them filled the small church. Even Judge Morrison attended, his presence a testament to how much had changed. Clara wore a simple blue dress, practical but pretty, like her new life. Jonas had reluctantly donned formal wear, though he'd insisted on wearing his gun belt. Old habits, he'd said, and Clara hadn't argued. She understood the need to feel armed against a world that could turn cruel without warning. Do you, Clara Whitmore? Take this man, the minister began, but Clara interrupted. I took him long ago, she said clearly, in a canyon hideout with no witnesses but the stars. This is just telling the rest of you about it. Shocked murmurs rippled through the gathering, but Jonas laughed, that full, free laugh she'd worked so hard to earn. That's my Clara, he said, never doing things the expected way. The minister, flustered but game, adjusted. Well then, by the power vested in me and apparently ratified by the stars themselves, I pronounce you husband and wife. Their kiss drew cheers and a few tears. Clara felt Margaret's hand squeeze hers as they turned to face their community, not the society they'd been born to, but the one they'd chosen and fought for. The reception was held at the Morrison Ranch, under stars that had witnessed so much of their story. Jonas had insisted on barbecue instead of fancy catering, and couples danced to fiddle music on boards laid over the grass. "No regrets?" Jonas asked as they swayed together, the party continuing around them. "You keep asking that," Clara observed. "Are you waiting for a different answer?" "Never. Just like hearing you say it." "Then no, Mr. Creed. No regrets. Not about choosing you, fighting beside you, or marrying you in front of God in Wyoming territory." She grinned. "Though I might regret letting you lead if you step on my feet again." "Sass," Jonas growled, spinning her dramatically. "I married a woman full of sass." "You married a woman who shot a man to save you," Clara corrected. Sass was always included in that package. As the evening progressed, Clara found a moment with Margaret in the garden Jonas had helped her plant behind their new home, a small house on the Morrison property where they'd begin their married life. "You're happy," Margaret said. It wasn't a question. "Happier than I knew was possible." Clara watched Jonas talking with McGill, his rare smile more frequent now. "He gave me myself, Margaret, and then he gave me himself. What more could I want?" "Children?" Margaret suggested gently. "I know," the doctor said. "Maybe, maybe not." Clara had made peace with this uncertainty. "Jonas says we're already a family. If children come, they'll be welcomed. If not, we'll love the life we build together." Margaret hugged her tightly. "You've become so strong. I was always strong. I just needed the right circumstances to show it." Clara smiled. "And a man who saw it even when I didn't." As if summoned, Jonas appeared. "Mrs. Creed. They're calling for another dance. Mrs. Creed." Clara repeated, savoring it. "I suppose I'll have to get used to that. Better than the Outlaw's woman," Jonas pointed out. "I was proud to be that too," Clara said firmly. They rejoined the celebration, but as midnight approached, Jonas caught Clara's hand. "Come with me. I have a wedding gift." He led her to the barn, where a beautiful bay mare stood in a freshly cleaned stall. The horse was fine-boned but sturdy, with intelligent eyes and a coat that gleamed like copper. "She's yours," Jonas said. "Figured my wife should have her own mount for when we ride the property, or if we ever need to run again," he added, only half joking. Clara threw her arms around him. "She's perfect, though I hope our running days are behind us." "They are." Jonas held her close. "But it doesn't hurt to be prepared. The world hasn't completely changed. Clara, there'll always be those who see us as the outlaw and his woman. Then they're blind," Clara said fiercely. "We're Jonas and Clara Creed, ranchers, occasional legal assistants, and proof that love finds a way even in the darkest places." They consummated their legal marriage that night in their new home, with proper beds and walls that didn't let in wind. But Clara missed their canyon hideaway with surprising intensity, the raw simplicity of survival, the fierce privacy of their connection. "Different than our first time," Jonas observed, holding her afterward. "Different doesn't mean better or worse," Clara said. "Just different. I loved who we were then, desperate and wild and clinging to each other. I love who we are now too, building something lasting." "Philosophical in bed," Jonas teased. "I married a philosopher. You married a woman who thinks too much," Clara corrected. "But you love me anyway." "Because of it, not despite it." Jonas kissed her forehead. "Your mind was one of the first things I noticed, after the fear in your eyes and the steel in your spine." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Clara continued her legal studies while Jonas expanded his role at the ranch. Their home became a gathering place for their unconventional family. McGill stopping by with tall tales, Mrs. Foster visiting with news from her network of reformers, Margaret's letters bringing Boston closer. One evening, as Clara prepared briefs for a case defending a woman accused of horse theft, Jonas watched from the doorway. "What?" she asked, noticing his scrutiny. "Just thinking how far we've come." The woman I pulled from that burning saloon would barely recognize you now. Clara considered this. She's still in here, that frightened girl, convinced she was worthless. Sometimes when I'm fighting for these women in court, I'm fighting for her too. Jonas crossed to her, pulling her up and into his arms. That frightened girl was never worthless. She just hadn't found her worth yet. Lucky for her. Clara murmured against his chest. A dangerous outlaw showed her the way. Lucky for him, Jonas countered. She was brave enough to follow. They stood like that, holding each other in the lamplight of their small home. Two people who'd found salvation in the most unlikely place, each other's arms, outside. The Wyoming night stretched vast and free, no longer threatening but full of promise. Their love story had begun in violence and desperation, been tested by pursuit and prejudice, but it had survived, transformed into something deeper, a partnership built on respect, passion, and the unshakable knowledge that they'd chosen each other against all odds. No regrets, Jonas whispered one last time. Clara lifted her face for his kiss. Never, she promised, not one single moment. And in their modest home on the edge of civilization, the former outlaw and the woman who'd been declared worthless proved that sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in society's approval or wealth's accumulation, but in the simple, revolutionary act of seeing and being seen, of choosing and being chosen, of building a life together one day at a time, their future stretched before them, uncertain but unafraid. Whatever came, they'd face it as they'd faced everything else, together, united, and absolutely certain of their worth to each other. The spring of their second year of marriage brought unexpected news. Clara had been feeling poorly for weeks, attributing it to long hours studying for her law examinations. But when Margaret arrived for her annual visit, she took one look at her sister and summoned Dr. Hartwell, now her husband, for an examination. Impossible, Clara said flatly when he delivered his diagnosis. The doctors in Boston said, doctors can be wrong. James Hartwell interrupted gently. The human body has remarkable healing capacities. You're approximately 3 months along, Mrs. Creed. Jonas, who'd been pacing like a caged wolf since the examination began, stopped dead. Clara's with child. Indeed, though given her history, she'll need careful monitoring, no strenuous activity. Regular rest. I have cases pending, Clara protested. The Morrison theft trial is next month. The cases will wait, Jonas said firmly, crossing to kneel beside her chair. His hands trembled as he took hers. Clara, we're having a baby. The wonder in his voice broke through her shock. Clara had accepted childlessness, built a different future in her mind. Now that carefully constructed vision shifted, making room for a possibility she'd never dared imagine. We're having a baby, she repeated, then burst into tears. The pregnancy was difficult. True to Dr. Hartwell's warnings. Clara's body struggled with the demands. She was confined to bed for much of the final months, driving her half-mad with inactivity. Jonas became fiercely protective, barely leaving her side. I'm not made of glass, Clara grumbled one August afternoon, the heat making her irritable. No, Jonas agreed, bathing her face with a cool cloth. You're made of steel, but even steel needs tending. Michael Hardy visited regularly, bringing case files and legal texts to keep Clara's mind occupied. She dictated briefs from bed, determined to maintain her practice despite physical limitations. You're establishing interesting precedent, Hardy observed. A pregnant woman practicing law, even by proxy. The Bar Association is in fits. Good, Clara said fiercely. Let them choke on their conventions. But as her time approached, even Clara had to admit defeat. The pain started on a September morning. Sharp and sudden. Jonas sent for Dr. Hartwell then paced their bedroom like his old outlaw self, hand twitching toward his gun as if he could shoot their way out of this danger. Go! Clara gasped between contractions. You're making me nervous. I'm not leaving you. Then sit down and give me your hand to break. The labor lasted 18 hours. Clara, who'd faced gunfights with steadiness, found childbirth a different battle entirely. She screamed, cursed, and at one point told Jonas she was going to shoot him for doing this to her. "Fair enough," he said, never releasing her hand despite her crushing grip. When their daughter finally arrived, squalling and perfect, the room fell silent with awe. "Doctor." Hartwell placed the baby on Clara's chest, and she stared down at the tiny face, overwhelmed. "She's so small," Clara whispered. "She's perfect." Jonas touched the baby's cheek with one finger, tears streaming down his face. "Look what we made, Clara. Look what our love created." They named her Sarah Margaret Creed. Sarah for Jonas's mother, Margaret for the sister who'd never stopped believing in Clara's worth. She had Jonas's dark hair but Clara's stubborn chin, and from the first, she owned both their hearts completely. The christening brought their extended family together. McGill had carved a beautiful cradle, his gruff manner hiding deep emotion. Mrs. Foster presented an heirloom silver rattle, declaring Sarah would need strong toys for the strong woman she'd become. Judge Morrison, now a frequent dinner guest, offered to establish a trust fund for her education. "She'll have choices," he said quietly, "whatever path she wants to walk." But not everyone celebrated the Creed family's joy. DeWitt might be imprisoned, but his influence hadn't entirely died. Whispers followed Clara when she finally returned to town, the reformed outlaw's wife, playing at respectability. Some businesses still refused their custom. One afternoon, pushing Sarah's pram through town while Jonas met with cattle buyers, Clara encountered a group of women outside the mercantile. She recognized several, wives of prominent citizens who'd benefited from DeWitt's corruption. "Clara Creed," one said with false sweetness. "How maternal you look. Mrs. Davidson." Clara nodded politely. "Maneuvering around them?" "Such a shame," another woman stage whispered. "That innocent child, born into such circumstances, her father a criminal, her mother a what?" Clara turned back, her voice deadly quiet. "Do finish your thought, Mrs. Powell." The woman flushed but lifted her chin. "Well, we all know what kind of woman takes up with outlaws, and now you parade around town as if you belong." "I belong wherever I choose to stand." Clara interrupted. "My husband and I have been cleared by the law and our consciences. If you have issue with that, I suggest you take it up with Judge Morrison. Or perhaps you'd prefer to discuss it with my husband directly." The women paled at the implied threat. Jonas's reputation as a dangerous man, though he'd lived peacefully for 2 years, still carried weight. "We meant no offense, Mrs." Davidson said quickly. "Of course you did." Clara smiled coldly. "But you lack the courage to give it honestly. Good day, ladies." She continued her walk, head high, but her hands shook on the pram handle. Sarah fussed, sensing her mother's distress, and Clara found a quiet bench to nurse her. "Don't you listen to them," she whispered to her daughter. "You're no more defined by our past than I was by their expectations. You'll make your own way." When Clara related the encounter that evening, Jonas's face darkened. "I'll have words with their husbands." "You'll do no such thing." Clara caught his hand. "We can't fight every slight. Jonas, we knew this wouldn't be easy." "It should be." He pulled her close. Sarah cradled between them. "You deserve their respect, not their judgment. I have the respect of those who matter. The rest." Clara shrugged. "Let them whisper. We know our truth." But the incident sparked a larger conversation. As Sarah grew from infant to toddler, displaying her father's adventurous spirit and her mother's quick mind, they faced a decision. Stay in Wyoming, where their past would always shadow them, or seek a fresh start elsewhere? The answer came from an unexpected source. A letter arrived from California, from a group of women seeking to establish a legal aid society for those the system ignored. They'd heard of Clara's work, her unique perspective. Would she consider relocating to help build something revolutionary? California, Jonas mused that night. Sarah asleep on his chest. Gold rush is slowing, but there's opportunity. Land for ranching, cities growing fast, Away from everyone we know, Clara pointed out. McGill, Margaret's visits, the practice I've built here. But also away from whispers and judgment, a place where Sarah could grow up without our shadows over her. Clara was quiet, considering. She'd fought so hard for acceptance here, carved out a place through sheer determination. Starting over felt like surrender. Or, Jonas continued slowly, we stay and keep fighting, keep proving them wrong. One case at a time. Your choice. Clara. Like always. That night, Clara walked to the window, looking out at the Wyoming landscape that had witnessed their transformation. This harsh, beautiful land had tested them, broken them down, rebuilt them stronger. Could she leave it behind? Sarah stirred in her crib, making soft baby sounds. Clara crossed to her, lifting her daughter into her arms. In the moonlight, Sarah's face was perfect innocence, unmarked by the world's judgments. What would you want? Clara whispered. To grow up where everyone knows your parents' story, or to write your own from the beginning? Sarah's tiny hand closed around Clara's finger, grip surprisingly strong. Like everything else about the Creed family, stronger than expected. The decision crystallized. Clara returned to bed, curling into Jonas's warmth. We stay, she said firmly. This is our home. We earned our place here with blood and tears. I won't let small-minded gossips drive us out. Jonas kissed her temple. My fierce Clara, those California women don't know what they're missing. I'll write to them, offer to help from here, share what I've learned, maybe even travel occasionally to consult. When Sarah's older. Clara smiled in the darkness. We'll build bridges instead of burning them. Over the following months, Clara established correspondence with legal reformers across the West. Her unique perspective, criminal's partner turned advocate, provided insights others missed. She wrote articles, advised on cases, slowly building a reputation that transcended local prejudice. Jonas expanded his partnership with Morrison, introducing new breeding programs that improved their stock. He also began training young men in horsemanship and tracking, skills learned in his outlaw days, now applied to lawful purposes. Sarah grew surrounded by their unconventional family. McGill taught her to whistle before she could properly talk. Mrs. Foster shared stories of brave women who changed the world. Margaret visited every summer, bringing books and Boston refinements that amused everyone. On Sarah's 3rd birthday, they held a party at the ranch. To Clara's surprise, more townspeople attended than expected. Some came from curiosity, but others seemed genuinely warm. Children played together, unconscious of their parents' complicated histories. Look at that, Jonas murmured, watching Sarah lead a pack of children in some elaborate game. She's already got your leadership skills, and your ability to charm people into following her anywhere, Clara added. Mrs. Davidson approached hesitantly, her daughter in tow. Mrs. Creed, I owe you an apology for that day at the Mercantile and other things. Clara studied her, seeing genuine regret. What changed your mind? My husband lost everything when DeWitt's bank dealings were exposed. We would have starved. But Mr. Hardy took our case pro bono, on your recommendation, he said. Tears filled her eyes. You had every reason to let us suffer, but you didn't. Everyone deserves justice, Clara said simply, even those who've wronged us. As the party continued, Jonas found Clara standing apart, watching the crowd with an unreadable expression. Regrets? He asked. Their old ritual. No, Clara said slowly. Just marveling. 3 years ago, you pulled me from a burning saloon. Now we're hosting birthday parties and discussing cattle breeding with judges. It's surreal. Life's strange turns. Jonas wrapped his arms around her from behind. But I'd ride every hard mile again to get here. Even the gunfights, especially those, they showed me what you were made of. He nuzzled her neck. My warrior woman. Former warrior, Clara corrected. Now a respectable lawyer's wife and mother. Still a warrior, just fighting in courtrooms instead of canyons. Jonas turned her in his arms. And still the bravest person I know. As sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Clara reflected on their journey. From that desperate night in Cheyenne to this moment of hard-won peace, every step had led them here. The path hadn't been straight or easy, but it had been theirs. "Mama, Papa!" Sarah ran to them, face bright with joy. "Uncle McGill says he'll teach me to rope tomorrow." "Did he now?" Jonas scooped her up, making her giggle. "And what does Mama think about that?" "Mama thinks," Clara said, kissing both their faces, "that a Creed woman should know how to handle a rope, among other things." They stood together as guests began departing, exchanging pleasantries that would have been impossible 3 years ago. Some minds would never change, but others had opened, slowly, gradually. "Worth fighting for?" Jonas asked quietly. Clara looked at their daughter, at their home, at the community they'd painstakingly built, every single day. She affirmed. That night, after Sarah was asleep and the house was quiet, Jonas and Clara sat on their porch, watching stars wheel overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first desperate flight, their canyon refuge, their love's awakening. "What are you thinking?" Jonas asked. "About circles," Clara said. "How we ran so far, only to find ourselves where we started. But different, changed. Better? Definitely better." Clara laced their fingers together. "We're not those scared, desperate people anymore. We're Jonas and Clara Creed, parents, ranchers, occasionally reformed outlaws." Jonas laughed. "Is that what we're calling it? Would you prefer former desperados? I prefer man who loves his wife and daughter more than life itself." Clara's throat tightened. After all these years, he could still move her with simple truths. "And I'm simply Clara, who found her worth in the most unlikely place. In yourself," Jonas corrected. "I just helped you see it." They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build a life in the light. Not a perfect life. Sarah would face challenges as the daughter of their controversial union. There would always be those who judged, who whispered, who condemned. But there would also be this: love that had survived everything thrown at it. A partnership forged in desperation and tempered by trials. A daughter who would grow up knowing her worth came from within, not from others' opinions. "No regrets?" Jonas asked one final time. Clara rose, pulling him up with her. "Come to bed, Mr. Creed, and I'll show you how few regrets I have." He followed her inside, past Sarah's room where their miracle slept peacefully, to the bed they'd shared as husband and wife, partners and lovers, former outlaws who'd found redemption in each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, cases to argue, horses to train, a daughter to raise in a world still learning to accept women's strength. But tonight, they had this: each other, their love, and the profound satisfaction of a life built on their own terms. The outlaw and the lady who'd been declared worthless had created worth from nothing but determination and devotion. They'd proven that love could bloom in the harshest ground, that people could change, that sometimes the greatest treasure was simply being seen and chosen for exactly who you were. As Clara settled into Jonas's arms, she smiled in the darkness. Their wild flight had led them home, not to a place, but to each other, and that, she knew with bone-deep certainty, was worth everything they'd endured to find it. In the morning, Sarah would wake them with laughter. McGill would arrive with his rope and tall tales. The world would continue spinning with all its judgments and possibilities. But here, now, in this moment of perfect peace, Clara Whitmore Creed knew the truth that no whisper could diminish. She was loved. She was valued. She was home, and she had absolutely no regrets. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the Old West, where love bloomed against all odds. If you're listening to this story, we'd love to know where in the world you are. Please comment below and share where you're tuning in from. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel From Wild West for more tales of courage, redemption, and romance from America's frontier days. What did you think of Clara and Jonas's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one and love connecting with our listeners around the globe.